So yeah, my name is Chris Kuchar. I've been with SunPower about 5.5 years. The reason I'm really happy to be here tonight for twofold. One is because clean techs and promoting the use of clean environment helps pay my mortgage and put my kids through school, and it's the right thing to do, number one. But number two, I've got a passion for smaller startup and incubator type things. So my background is I'm an equipment finance person by trade, right? I started out in the equipment finance business in the mid-'80s with Hewlett-Packard. Came out here to Dell in the mid-'90s and started up their financing unit, Dell Financial. And a couple of us from Dell Financial, we spun off and we formed our own vendor finance company here in Austin. Very small startup company. We ended up growing from 3 people to 20. And we did a bunch of small vendor programs where we were doing financing for small startup companies that needed a finance program for customers to acquire their product, but weren't big enough to attract money from banks and others. So the idea of incubating small and startups is really passionate to me, as well as renewable. While I was at my last company doing vendor financing, one of the vendors that we were doing financing for was a small Texas solar installer, Standard Renewable Energy. Any of you guys ever hear of them? Okay, they went out of business a few years ago, but we were doing their financing, Standard Renewable Energy Finance. And so I got exposed to the solar market probably 2008, really when the tax equity and the third-party ownership kind of structure in residential financing was taken off nationally. And I fell in love with the model because, wait a second, you're telling me that you can put solar on my roof, I can do the right thing for the environment, and I can save money every month. Like, what's the catch? And there is none. So we always felt bad. It says if we couldn't get a customer to sign up, it's because we were doing a poor job educating people, not because we couldn't close a sale. And that's where we are with solar right now. It is below the cost of energy in many markets. And it's like, if you can do the right thing and save money doing it, like it should be order taking, right? It should be a no-brainer. So I just fell in love with the model. And for a guy like me, that's really unusual. So again, in the finance industry for 30 years, yes, I'm a Republican capitalist by trade, fully admit it. Full disclosure with y'all right here. I eat barbecue, I drink beer. Okay, I appreciate the vegetarian options tonight, but I mean, I've had 2 Suburbans in my life. One had 236,000 miles, one had 186,000 miles. Big V8s, right? Yeah, so I was one of those guys. I have 3 air conditioners in my house. And I'm not saying that to brag, I'm saying it because I was one of the naive people that just didn't know any better, right? It's like, hey, if I want to drive a Suburban, I'll drive a Suburban. If I want to run through it, I mean, what's the difference, right? Gas is cheap, electricity is cheap in Texas. And really didn't understand it until I got involved and got exposed to the solar industry and learned about it. And I said, hey, okay, well, you know, I'm an economic guy. This stuff makes economic sense, right? I don't want to do things just to do it, but it makes economic sense. So the first thing I did is I replaced my light bulbs in the house with LED. Like, wow, these things are actually better and they never burn out. What a cool thing. And then I put in a couple low-flow water toilets. When you're down there scraping off the wax ring on your old stuff, you're getting passionate about doing like renewable and efficiency. Now you're really committed, right? So today I've got solar on the house. I installed my first Nest thermostat about a month ago. So for even guys like me, and that's why I think this type of association is really good, even old dogs can learn new tricks. So anyway, I fell in love with the model at my last company, came over to SunPower. SunPower started up its residential financing business the end of 2011. I started up with SunPower at the start of 2012 because they decided Austin, Texas is where they wanted to start up their residential financing business. So SunPower headquartered in California, in San Jose. But when they said we want to get into residential financing, which is expanded into commercial, into power plant, they wanted to set up the infrastructure to support that in Austin because of the tech culture in Austin, because of everything else. It doesn't have to be in California. So we're, I think, about 350 people in Austin. For those of you that don't know, is anybody not familiar with SunPower? I should have probably started with the company. I'm assuming everybody here knows SunPower. So I'm here as Chris Kuchar tonight. I'm not here to pontificate SunPower. Actually, I have to officially disclose I'm not going to give any company dogma today, either because I haven't cleared it through corporate communications or because I'd rather this just be a local Austin market. Let's share what do you guys want to hear, etc. So I'm happy to answer whatever questions you want to ask as we go through this, but I'm not here to give you a 25-page presentation on SunPower. If you guys want to do that, talk to Ryan. I'll be happy to put a presentation together for you afterward. Okay. So any questions as we go along, we can spit it out. Dwayne talked about some of the technology stuff I'll go over. I'm probably the least tech-savvy person in this room, I'm guessing, without even knowing what all y'all do. So I'll talk a little bit about it. But what I thought would be interesting is to talk about clean tech. What does it take to deploy the clean tech, not the tech itself, right? So what is beyond the tech? So there's a lot of people in clean tech that want to invent the next clean tech item, right? What's the next best thing in solar? What's the next best thing in storage? What's the next best thing in microinverters, right? What's the next best thing in monitoring? And really what I thought would be interesting to do is, okay, number one, because I'm not a tech guy, but number two is, how do you deploy all this great new tech that's being developed, right? Because a lot of the roadblocks to adoption and spread of renewables are things like policy problems, tax incentives or disincentives, okay? Support from the utilities that either are with you or against you, depending on the state you're going into. A lot of things that are soft cost related that prevents you from deploying this. And why is that topic kind of passionate to me? So you guys remember Superstorm Sandy that went through the Northeast, was about 3 years ago? Knocked out power for about a week. So there was a program put forth by Con Edison to try and test backup power in a distributed fashion. So they basically gave SunPower 800 kilowatts of battery systems 3 years ago and said, we don't want to deploy these at a central utility power hub. We want you to deploy these remotely at different homes and see if the idea of backup power remotely is something you want to go with. We had 800 kilowatts of free batteries that we would give free to any customer that put solar on the roof. Put solar on your roof and we're going to give you a free battery backup. 3 years ago. 800 kilowatts of batteries are still sitting in a warehouse because they're not approved by the fire department in FDNY. I mean, it's like you can't get people to work together. So the deployment and the usage of all the cool stuff we're coming up with is, to me, one of the challenging things to talk about. So we'll talk about the tech, but more importantly, how to deploy the tech, what are the barriers to deploying the tech, things like that. And then anything else you guys want to try and go over as we go through it. Okay? Okay, so I'll get my technology chops out of the way early, and then I can say that I talked tech for a while. But to do that, I'm going to need a volunteer. Somebody that's not a SunPower employee.
Jennifer.
All right, come on up here, Jennifer. So I was asked to talk a little bit about solar cells because that's what we do at SunPower. So I will talk a little bit about it. This is not a SunPower solar cell. This is a typical Chinese tier 1 solar cell. Okay? Front contact, lines, etc. What we do at SunPower when we test our solar equipment, because we deploy ourselves on residential rooftops, we deploy ourselves in commercial and industrial applications, and most of our megawatts have been deployed in power plants throughout the world. We have 9 gigawatts of SunPower solar in operation today. So we're in all different geographies: Middle East, Asia, Africa, Europe, North America, etc. Our group manages power plants in Japan, power plants in Chile. We've got stuff all over the world. So anyway, our testing group, they have to go through all of these different testing scenarios, and one of the tests they do is called thermocycling. Okay? So what is thermocycling? Really important in Arizona, for example, where it gets really cold at night and really hot during the day. Okay? Well, what is a solar cell primarily made of?
Silicon.
Silicon. What is silicon?
It is a crystalline, and it's also its voltage increases when it gets cold, and it's lower when it gets
See,
hot.
I told you I was the least tech savvy.
So,
That's an excellent answer. In my world, it's called glass. Glass?
Made from melted sand, yes.
Glass with metal on it, right? That's as simple as I get. So glass with metal on it. So if you have glass with metal on it and you're running it through thermal cycles, what happens? The metal is going to expand and contract over time. The glass doesn't do squat, right?
Sure.
So take this, if you will, Jennifer, and just assume that it's going through thermal cycling, and just kind of just...
Oh yeah, isn't that lovely? Look, nice. Yeah.
Whoa, hold on. What did you do to myself? Wait, do that again.
It's not very flexible.
Just do that again.
Oh really? Okay. Oh well, look at that. 2 bins and...
Is there another volunteer? All right, I've got one left. It's a SunPower cell. Can you do the same
okay.
thing?
We'll see if we can do it. It's the flexible. Oh, uh-oh.
What happened?
It didn't break as much. It's kind of like the tempered glass on your windshield.
So here's what I know about PV cell technology. Thank you. It was outstanding work. Big hand for Jennifer. Normal Chinese cells, front contact, when it cracks, it shatters. This cell is no longer useless, and the chain of which they're integrated in a panel becomes useless, and the panel becomes useless. SunPower, full metal backsheet on the cell, so when it cracks, the cell stays intact. This has got a crack in it, but it's still a fully functioning cell. It's not performing quite as well, but it's a fully functioning cell. Didn't shatter, didn't break, and the chain with which it's in the panel works as well. Okay? So you hear a lot about cell efficiency when you hear about solar, and that equates to, okay, well, how efficient are you at turning sunlight into watts? But really, from a SunPower standpoint, we have the world's most efficient solar panel in mass market, but it's really not about the efficiency so much as it's about the durability and the longevity and the rate of decay compared to the Chinese Tier 1 cells. So not only will this cell produce less energy as it starts to decay, but it's going to decay, right? So most of what I'll call the CT1 stuff, Chinese Tier 1, when it's sold, they'll tell you, okay, well, it has a 35-year useful life, but they warranty it for 10 years. Okay? SunPower offers a 25-year warranty on the cell. So you see a lot of people now moving toward what they call high efficiency. And high efficiency is great. You get more watts per panel. So we used to build panels that were 250 watt panels. We broke the 300 watt barrier. Now we're doing panels that are 425 watts. And what that means is you need fewer panels to generate the same amount of electricity. Your install costs go down. Anyway, the point is I'm trying to get to why the soft costs associated with deploying energy are really more important than the tech on the cell. Okay? So you see a lot of people going to high efficiency, but what they're really getting into is durability, lack of decay, things like that. So companies like LG, Panasonic, if you've read what Tesla's trying to do in Buffalo in their solar factory that now is taken over by Panasonic. Panasonic's trying to use their HT, high efficiency technology. So there's a lot of discussion about how do you get value out of clean tech, right? If I deploy it and then it doesn't last and it goes away, then the economics are wrong and the whole model kind of falls apart. So you want to have sustained credibility in a lot of the stuff you're doing for renewables, not just, hey, this is the right thing to do for the environment. Because if it falls apart and you have to throw it away and you have to build it again later on, are you really doing the right thing for the environment? Same's kind of true with storage. What are batteries made out of?
Lead or lithium.
Cobalt?
Cobalt, yeah.
Anybody seen cobalt being mined?
Yeah.
It's one of the dirtiest processes you can ever imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this great storage. We like storage. We need batteries. It's more renewable, right? The cobalt. Go look up YouTube for a cobalt mine. It's not a pretty sight. So anyway, there's a lot of things that inhibit the deployment of this stuff. So that's my tech talk for the night. Everything else that was on the agenda is now going to be pivoted. Okay. So anyway, why do I say that? So we want to take stuff like this, and I'm not just promoting SunPower, but there's a lot of really cool tech out there that's designed to be deployed to last, to give the customer the benefit of they want, and not just, hey, look at this really cool thing I invented. Okay? Like a lot of the initial microinverters that were put out in the field, they high failure rates. Okay? Now customers aren't getting any energy. It's sitting on their roof, or you have to go back and repair it, and companies go out of business, and it's a downward death cycle. So anyway, a couple of things I thought maybe would be interesting just to chat about tonight, and you guys maybe by either show of hands or just screaming out loud can tell me which ones you'd want to focus on. But I've got topics for policy issues, incentive issues, economic incentives, just financing in general, how that works for SunPower in the solar industry, kind of some of the mandates that we're seeing out there. So we pulled out of the Paris Accord and the Clean Air Act. There are a lot of still local mandates we can do. And then just basically how a lot of this technology stuff that we're seeing integrates together, what our customers are asking for, of how do you integrate building control systems with solar, with storage, with what we call green power, or gray power, excuse me. The combination of green power and black power gives you gray power, right? Has anybody heard that term before, gray power?
No.
I've heard it called dark green.
Dark green? So it's basically saying, hey, why don't you put a solar power plant right next to a natural gas plant so that they can kind of offset each other, and at night you still got consistency of power, so you've got a combination of gray power. And so that sounds like, why would you build a natural gas plant? Why don't you just do storage? But then you go back to see how is storage mined, and you see all that cobalt, and you're like, yeah, natural gas isn't so bad if you need to have gray power, So that's the kind of stuff we're thinking of when we say, okay, integration, what do you really want to do? Do you want to build solar plus storage, or do you want to build solar next to hydro? Solar combined with wind. Because you know what? When the sun's the highest, the wind's the lowest. The wind picks up at night, right, when you're not getting any sun. So maybe that's the right combination. Build a wind farm next to your solar farm. But what happens if it's dark and quiet? So you still have to have what I'll call traditional power generation in there. Okay? So any one of those topics, either more or less interesting to start with?
How about financing and integration issues?
Financing and integration issues. Okay, I'll start with that up there.
It's where the solar cells are made from. The tariff, what's happening?
I'd be happy to talk about tariff and where solar cells are made. That's a good one. But so financing and integration. Start there and then we'll go through the tariff.
Can you sidebar with PACE on that too, if that's something you're
Absolutely.
involved with?
Property assessed clean energy? Excellent. So one of the biggest inhibitors to deploying solar is just the cost, right? The payback is over long periods of time. You don't get instant payback day one. You have to put out large sums of money. And that's consistent whether you're a residential customer or whether you're a giant utility buying power from one of our solar farms. So traditionally, when you buy things, you think about, okay, I'm going to buy it, I'm going to use it myself. Okay? But because solar is so heavily incented with tax credits, the investment tax credit first and foremost, a lot of the solar we deploy is through what we call third-party ownership. Meaning the systems themselves, whether it's a power plant or whether it's a system on somebody's house in California, are actually owned by a third-party finance company. Okay? That third-party finance company then owns the system, is able to take advantage of the tax benefits. So many banks that have large tax bills, many corporate entities that have large tax bills, they like to buy these assets because it's a great tax offset for them. Plus, it helps them achieve their corporate sustainability goals. So if you're a large corporate, think Apple, think Google, think Microsoft, people like that, not only are they using renewables in their businesses, but they're funding renewables, so they're supporting the growth of renewables, and they count that toward their corporate goals. So a lot of what we do is funded by third parties. That's actually what our group does in Austin, is we manage all of these assets on behalf of the third-party investors, whether it's a power plant or a homeowner. So they invest in them, and the investing is a combination of people who have what's called tax appetite, or you're a tax equity investor. I will give you 40 cents on the dollar for that system, and in exchange you give me all the benefits, the ITC and the depreciation, and we allocate it that way. Then you have what's left. You have those tax investors that say, I'm happy to invest in taxes, but I don't want to take any other risk associated with customers actually buying the power. Like, I don't want to take credit risk that whoever's supposed to buy that power is actually going to pay for it. And that credit risk could be, we have some customers, PG&E in California buys power from us. Mrs. Smith in her house buys power from us. Okay? Macy's stores buys power from us on things called power purchase agreements. I'm not buying the asset, but I'm buying the power from that system. So whatever power you generate, just like the utility, I'll pay it from you at a fixed or agreed upon price. So it's not like the utility where it's regulated, where they're going to decide how much they're going to charge, but we will go and we'll put a 20-year power purchase agreement. We say we will sell you all the energy from the system for 11.5 cents a kilowatt hour, fixed for 20 years. So those cash flows, those 20 years worth of cash flows, if we expect to sell so much energy, we expect to get so much cash from that energy. So now we have a second investor who comes in and says, I don't have tax appetite, give the tax benefits to those guys with big tax bills, but I want to invest in renewable. How can I play? Well, we sell them, or we let them invest in the anticipated cash flows that power is going to generate for 20 years. Okay? So we'll take the estimate 20 years of customer payments from power, we'll discount it back at some rate of return. Okay, well, pick a number, call it 8%, and then somebody will pay us for the rights to those cash flows. Now, hopefully, the amount of money you can raise from discounting those cash flows and the amount of money you get from tax equity will be enough to build the friggin' system. That's how the math is supposed to work. Okay? That doesn't work in all states. If you have a state that has a very high cost of power, the value of my cash flows is very high. I can get a lot of money for those. If I'm in a state with a low cost of power, I can't sell very much value in those cash flows, so I can't get as much money, I can't deploy that solar system. Now, so here's where it comes in on the policy side on how to make this work, right? If you're in a state that has a high cost of energy, and I can raise a lot of money because there's a lot of rent coming in from it, if you're a customer that pays $200 a month for a utility bill, I can charge you $180 a month, and that still saves you money. That's still a good deal. And I can discount monthly payments of $180 a month. If you're in a different state with a lower cost of electricity and your electric bill is $100 a month, and I would need to sell you electricity at $90 a month to save you money, the only way for me to make that work is to have the cost of the system actually be less in the state where the power costs less. Okay? Well, when I build a solar cell, it doesn't cost me less to have that cell be in Arizona than it does in Hawaii. Okay? The cost of the cell is the cost of the cell. So what would allow us to have a lower cost of a solar system, and this is the case whether it's a power plant or an individual rooftop, so that I can make this financing combination of the tax benefits and the cash benefits work in multiple geographies. It's all related to the soft costs associated with deploying this stuff. So how I opened out the conversation is, in order to deploy the technology, we need to do things not have so many administrative and regulatory things in the state of New York that it takes to put a battery in your house for backup purposes. Too expensive, couldn't get the regulations changed, the batteries are just sitting there. There are certain jurisdictions that are very friendly. Hey, if you get a building permit for your house and it's not going to cause a fire, that's all you get, you're good to go. There are some jurisdictions that say, no, I need to review your 3-line drawings from an engineering standpoint. I need to come out to the house and physically inspect it. I need you to pay this much money just as a revenue generating me for the city just because I said so, to give you the permission to hook it up to my utility. Those types of things make it too expensive for us to enter those areas where utility costs are too low. Okay? So the integration of financing with deployment of the technology is a big issue. Okay? Now, how does that equate to what's been going on with tax reform? So when I talk about this being third-party ownership in a lot of cases, now if you're a corporation or if you're an individual, you can buy it yourself if you want to and just get the benefit yourself over 10, 15, 20 years. We have a lot of customers that do that. But in this world of third-party ownership, where I've got a tax investor and I've got a cash investor, the recent tax reform, and I'm not talking 201, I'm just talking tax reform right now, was a double-edged sword. So corporate tax rates went from what?
35 to 20.
35 to 20.
16.
In some cases, yeah. So puts more money in the pockets of the corporations. They've got more money, they can buy more solar systems. So for the customers paying cash, kind of a windfall for us. There's something else with tax reform. There's something called bonus depreciation, which means you can depreciate 100% of the system in year one. You don't have to spread out the depreciation over 5 years. If you're paying cash, it's a good thing. If you're one of those people that says, I don't want to buy my system up front, I just want to pay for the electricity as I go to match my cash flow, and now I'm trying to sell the benefits of the system to a tax equity investor, yeah, I still get a 30% investment tax credit, but if you as a corporation have a lower tax bill, do you need as much offset anymore? Also, if you have a lower tax bill, you're paying 20%, not 35%, the value of depreciation from a tax standpoint is less, because depreciation is a write-off on your taxes. So tax reform is this double-edged sword. Really good for the economy in theory. Companies bringing cash back in from overseas. If you're an individual, you might have an extra $50 a month in your pocket that you can afford to pay for a solar system that you might not have thought about before. But on the flip side, the third-party owners that help make it work in the model I described before, the tax benefits are less valuable to them. Well, if the tax benefits are less valuable, then I need more money from these people that contribute the cash based on the customer payments, which is another motivator why I've got to get the cost down, because now I'm even more reliant on the people that are funding against the customer cash flows. How do we get the cost down? We got to get a lot of these soft costs and administrative and regulatory burdens. So part of this, and this is not for me to make a PR announcement for any particular political party, but the idea of business regulations is a real thing because it impacts our ability to deploy our solar, our clean technology in certain jurisdictions. Okay, so it's a real thing. It's not just, oh, we don't like government oversight. No, it's a difference between us being able to enter the state of South Carolina and sell solar or not.
Can I go back to the tax equity investors now that the tax rate has dropped? Clearly, theoretically, there's a smaller pool of investors, but do you actually feel or anticipate that putting a pinch on the market, or is there enough capacity right now, even with less?
So the company that provides us the largest amount of tax equity for our SunPower deals, they provided tax equity for our large 100 megawatt power plants, as well as individual 5 kilowatt systems on a home. They came to us right after tax reform and said, we're closed for 2018. Come back and talk to us in 2019. The largest player in solar tax equity financing has said that. Now, there are other players still available, but they're not necessarily as accommodating. They don't want to take as many risks. They're saying we play in this box only, right? So here's another example of how some of this regulatory reform hurts. In certain states, solar is becoming what's called standard, right? You now have to build solar standard when you build a new building or put in a roof on or something like that, okay? Great market. SunPower is in the new homes market. We have relationships with 70% of the new homes builders in the country. It's a great market for us. Homes are pre-designed, ready to build with solar. What a great way to promote this on an ongoing basis. It's perfect, okay? Tax equity funds it. It's awesome, okay? What if you live in a duplex? Now, if I put solar on the roof of a duplex, who owns the roof? Am I taking the credit risk of you in Unit A or the other person in Unit B? Right? And what if Unit B sells and you're still in Unit A and the guy in Unit B doesn't want solar anymore? How does that affect the credit risk? Or what if you're in a condo and the HOA owns the rooftops? And the HOA is now the one that has to give you easement rights to repair a system. And they don't want to because, you know, maybe you belong to an HOA? Some of those guys are zealots, aren't they? Like, wait a second, you got a playscape in your backyard that has a rainbow color, you know, such and such. I mean, so we're literally, so I'm not just talking about government regulation. We run into HOA regulations that don't allow solar because they want to protect the value of the rooftop, and they think granting an easement to a third party to maintain a solar system will dampen the value of the homes that the HOA is chartered with protecting. So the regulatory issues are from the federal level, the state level, the city level, down to the HOA level. So the tax equity players that are in the market, some of them would say, I'm willing to take HOA risk and still fund these. And some of the tax equity players we're seeing now is, I don't take HOA risk. I'm not going to allow you to do shared roofs anymore. Well, if I can't do shared roofs for a builder that says, you know, and in the communities I build standalone homes and I build, you know, multifamily. If you can't do my shared roofs, I can't give you the single family. And now you're on a death spiral again. So I keep going back to this theme as you guys are out there and you're talking about, hey, what's the next cool thing in terms of storage or energy management units or microinverters or something like that. Always keep in the back of your mind going, how am I going to deploy this stuff? What are the other things we need to think about, especially if you think about it in terms of, you know, being a business incubator and I want to actually create a commercial entity out of doing things that are clean tech related. You can build the greatest product in the world, but if you can't deploy it, and if you don't know what the obstacles are to actually, you know, raising the money to get it out there in the marketplace, doesn't matter how many speeds and feeds you got going through your widget. Okay. All right, PACE. I was describing third-party kind of ownership programs, leases and PPAs. If you want to buy a system yourself, it's called first-party ownership in the finance world. You're the owner, you're the user, you've got the whole thing. Okay. You could get a loan yourself if you want to, right? I don't have $30,000 to put a system on my house, but I could go to I could get a home equity line, I get a credit union, etc. In the commercial space specifically, there's a product that's been around for a few years now. It's in residential too, but it's really taken off in commercial. Property assessed clean energy. This is a great example of government and the finance community working in partnership. So the exact opposite of some of the problems I've been talking to you about before. Property assessed clean energy basically says, we will allow you to make one payment every year or twice a year, depending on your property taxes, and have it be assessed on your property tax bill. Okay? So you can get a 5-year loan, fundamentally, have that loan come through on your property tax assessment, and get the associated write-offs for it. Okay? And the credit for that, remember I talked before, some people don't want to take credit risk? The credit for that is treated very much like a mortgage credit. They look at what is the value of the property that the solar is going on. I'm not worried about looking at you as a credit risk, Mr. Customer, occupying the building. So you take this combination of the mortgage industry who understands the value of real estate as collateral. You got these local property taxing jurisdictions say, I'm willing to sign up and be a jurisdiction that allows PACE products. Financiers that say, yeah, if I've got people that underwrite the value of the building and I've got, you know, jurisdictional support from the local area, I want to be able to offer and fund this PACE type of product. Okay. Now it's a complicated sale a lot of times with PACE, but it's a great example of a partnership of government and private industry coming together. And you can use PACE for property assessed clean energy, right? So it's not just solar, it's not just storage. You can do it with your LED lights. If you're a big corporate campus and you're just retrofitting all your lighting, you can get a PACE loan. Integrate it with your storage system, integrate it with your building control management system for your AC. Okay, it's a great product out there.
Does that take away from the credit capacity of the building owner?
It's not supposed to. Now, every underwriter is different, but it's not supposed to.
So if you have a PACE, you know, it's kind of complicated and all that. So does that need some streamlining and all that?
Absolutely. So there are PACE providers, but they have to find jurisdictions that are willing to offer to integrate it with the property taxes bill. So again, it's a combination. So when you talk about, hey, what can I do in the clean energy space to really help? What type of jobs are out there? What can I do? You can design great clean tech. You can be in the support side of clean tech. You can be in the sales. You can be in the, how do I do policy advocation? How do I do the financing for it? How do I work together from a policy standpoint with public-private type stuff? Okay, so I was going to wait till the end to share this, but any of you live in Round Rock? Okay, any of you vote in the last mayor election in Round Rock? No, it's okay. There was a candidate on the ballot who's 18 years old, high school senior at Cedar Ridge High School. Same last name, coincidentally enough. Okay, political science major. He's doing his first semester right now at UTSA, right? He got so frustrated with the presidential election, he said, I'm not going to protest that, I'm going to do something. He ran for mayor of Round Rock last year, 18 years old. So he's studying political science down at UTSA. True story. Came home for Christmas break, says, Dad, I'm going to change my major. I said, but Josh, you love politics. You got into this whole, what are you doing? He says, I really want to do something, in clean tech, right? I see what you're doing, and I think it's a cool thing, and I want to do that. What can I do with a political science degree to do that? This is exactly the type of stuff that you can do, right? You can advocate, you can work on, public-private combinations and do things like that. So it opens up a whole new world for people. You don't necessarily have to be an environmental engineer, right, to work on things to promote clean tech, right? There's a whole slew of other options that people can get into if they want to get into clean tech that doesn't have to be the tech part of clean tech, okay? His mom hasn't signed off on changing the major yet, so we're going to see how this goes. Okay, 201. Somebody asked about 201. So that's tax reform. Let's talk about tax tariffs. Does anybody not know what 201 is if I say, let's talk about 201? Okay. You'll have to excuse me if I get a little bit moody. Section 201, as it's famously called, is essentially a provision in the trade rules that allow the U.S. government to put tariffs on imported products if they're viewed as harming domestic businesses. Okay? The last time Section 201 was invoked was in 2001 to try and protect the steel industry. Okay? It hadn't been used in 17 years. Basically, there were tariffs put on imported steel in 2001. They lasted for 2 years. The World Trade Organization said, nope, these are invalid, and they went away. Okay? There are two solar manufacturers in the U.S., one in Georgia and one in Oregon, both owned by foreign companies, one a German company and one a Chinese company, who were struggling as a company, whether due to their own work or not, who went out of business and claiming they went out of business because of Chinese dumping panels in the U.S. Okay? So these companies filed a petition for relief under Section 201 claiming that they were harmed by the Chinese dumping solar panels. So this case has been going on for about, 9 months. The beneficiaries being now foreign-owned corporations. And the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, I think it's the FTC that adjudicates this, they had open hearings, members from Congress, trying to support this, etc. The solar industry, SEIA, was totally against this because what these two companies were claiming is, hey, we need to put huge tariffs on imported solar and we need to limit the amount of solar that's imported, with the idea being that'll spur domestic U.S. manufacturing. Okay? So they're claiming, hey, we want to limit the amount of solar imported and we want to charge large tariffs. If we do, we're going to ramp up our U.S. manufacturing again. The solar industry is saying, great, you just raised the price of solar for everybody and you're going to kill all of these other jobs I'm talking about that are in support of the industry. In what industry do you know is there growth if you raise prices? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Let's raise prices and the industry will grow. No, the industry is going to shrink. So the Trade Commission basically ruled in favor of the petitioners, found yes, they were harmed by these imports. The decision ultimately went to the White House. Okay, so under the Section 201 rules, the president could take the recommendation from the Trade Commission, or he could say, nope, I'm going to do this. So there was a petition by companies saying the Chinese harmed them with domestic manufacturing. The Trade Commission found, yes, you were harmed. And so the recommendation went to the White House, and what do you think happened? Tax the damn Chinese panels. Of course, that's what he said. So on February 7th, what went into effect was a 30% tariff on imported solar cells and imported solar modules. Okay. SunPower makes its cells in the Philippines and Malaysia. We ship the cells primarily to plants in Mexico who turn the cells into modules. We are a U.S. company who employs thousands of people. We have spent hundreds of millions of dollars of R&D in our facility in California. And we are taxed 30 cents a watt. Not 30 cents a watt, 30% on our panels. And because SunPower makes higher quality cells and higher quality panels and higher efficiency, our costs are naturally higher. So on a gross dollar basis, we were paying more dollars in the form of tariff than the cheap Chinese stuff. Okay? I got a daughter trying to get into law school. That's not good for SunPower, right? It's not good for the industry, right? Because now it's either what? Everybody raises prices, reduces customer demand, or everybody tries to eat the margin and has to do, reductions in force or not pay bonuses or something like that to try and eke it out. But that's what's in effect right now, went into effect February 7th. So Section 201, tariffs on solar. Not only did we pull out of the Paris Accord, not only do we, get out of the Clean Energy Act, we are now officially putting a 30% tax on solar. And there's not that much domestic solar manufacturing. And the tough part about this 30% tariff is it costs a lot of money to build a solar plant. A lot of money. The tariff's in place for 4 years. By the time you design, build out, fit out with tools, testing, etc., to get a plant to produce solar cells, you're 2 years into it. You're not going to make enough money by manufacturing for 2 years with the higher cost than what it does to do it overseas to offset the cost of building the plant. So the tariff isn't driving what it was intended to do. It's dampening all these other support functions because the overall demand for solar is down.
Are you sure that's not what it was intended to do?
You said it. Again, another huge policy thing that has impacted the entire solar industry. And it's just, if you don't put solar on the roof, then what do I need batteries for, right? If I don't have solar plus batteries, why do I need an energy management system to manage my time of use rates and how I actually use electricity in my business? I mean, the waterfall of things this impacts isn't just the solar industry. It's all this other stuff, right? So, again, the deployment and the usage of other things not related to the tech itself is super, super important.
So what is the chance that the tariffs will meet the same, like what happened in 2001 with steel?
So companies have already filed with the WTO. With steel, it took 2 years for the WTO to rule. So, okay, if the WTO rules, then 2 years from now they'll be done. But, I mean, you guys watch the news. What do you think they want in Washington, right? They want leverage for trade things with China. So it was bring me a case. Well, guess what? We had 2 happy petitioners bring a case, and so here you are. Has nothing to do whatsoever with whether you support clean tech or not. It's I need a chip in the poker game on trade talks with China. Solar happens to be a casualty of the situation. gone over yet? Am I too much time?
Yeah, good question.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but since the payback nowadays versus a straight up buyer is 10 to 15 years, right? So residential or small commercial solar installation. 10 years ago, the payback was 10 or 15 years, is what I recall. So why is that? Is that true, first of all, and why hasn't the...
We have payback periods as short as 4 years, and we have some where it doesn't pay back because the cost of electricity is so low. So a couple things have changed. So when we value a solar system, when you value it for the purposes of calculating the 30% investment tax credit, the 30% investment tax credit is off of something called fair market value. Okay? What is the fair market value of a system? Because I don't want somebody to claim that this system, which really is worth $20,000, is worth $200,000 and claim a 30% ITC, because then you're getting free government money. And that's not the purpose of incentives. The purpose of incentives is to spur a younger industry to allow it to be payback positive until it's sufficient enough to have paybacks on its own. Okay, that's the purpose. So there's this idea of setting a benchmark called fair market value for independent appraisals. When I started with SunPower back in 2012, our fair market values were between $5.50 a watt and $6 a watt. Pretty high cost, long payback periods. Our average fair market value now runs between, call it $3.50 and $4.25. So the cost of solar has come way down, and so the payback periods have come down as well. Okay, that's why I say we've got some as soon as 4 years now. In Hawaii, where the avoided cost of power is like 35 cents, right? And you buy a solar system, your payback period is pretty quick. Now, why has it not come down in a linear fashion to cost? Part of the benefit of solar is based on a policy which is at the state level and sometimes at the utility level within that state called net metering. Does anybody not know what net metering is? Because we don't have it in Texas. So net metering is the concept that says when you overproduce, if you're not using the electricity you consume, you can send it back to the grid and we'll spin your meter backward. Texas does not have state mandated net metering. We're in what's called a retail electricity environment. You can pick your electric provider, unless you're in Austin Energy, and then you're stuck. Right? Then you're you will buy my power. And so the idea is that if you overproduce, you can sell back, and the policy mandates that who's ever buying it back, the utility has to buy it back at your retail rate. Okay? So if I sign up to do a lease for 16 cents a kilowatt hour, and I'm not using the electricity, right? I mean, I'm paying for electricity I'm not using, but I sell it back to the utility, so I get a credit on my bill for 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So instead of paying the utility, I'm paying you, but it all washes out. So a lot of these net metering policies had caps on them over time. So as soon as you deploy 100 megawatts, the net metering goes from full retail to 90% of retail. Or it might go down to wholesale rates of energy. And what just recently happened in Arizona is they cut the net metering down from a full 20-year guarantee down to 10 years guarantee. So now if you're in Arizona and you put solar on your home, and you sign up with the utility, say, I want to interconnect this to the grid, they say, great, I'll buy back your power for the first 10 years, but I'm not going to guarantee to buy anything back after that. So now the calculation in your head about when's my payback is changed. So our costs have come down, the payback period has come down, but in some states, and this is maybe where you're seeing some of the numbers have actually been flat from payback period, because as the costs go down, the value of net metering has also gone away. And so there's some of this balancing out of what that is. So again, it's the combination of all the other things to deploy solar. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because I said, look, incentives are meant to spur the industry to kind of get it up and running so it makes sense for itself. You don't expect the government to subsidize this forever, right? I mean, it's a good idea. It's the right thing to do. We like the fact that there's incentives. But at the end of the day, if something's not viable economically on its own, it's going to die on the vine, right? So a lot of these things are, if a utility says, well, why should I buy back your energy at full retail? Because now we have many, many customers who have zero electric bill. My solar system produces more energy than I use. I sell it back to the grid. You actually pay me for it. Now, the utility won't give you money, but they'll zero out your bill, so you don't owe them anything. So now I'm a utility, right? I'm Pernalis or Austin Energy or whatever you want to call it. I have to maintain the infrastructure of being a utility, I have to maintain the lines to your house, but you're not going to pay me any money. But if your solar system stops working, you're going to all of a sudden buy the energy from me, right? So I'm maintaining all of this. I'm not guaranteed to get any money, but you have to mandate that I'm available for you instantaneously if you need it. That's not really fair to the utilities, is it? Right? I mean, that's not really the right thing to do. So this idea of, hey, if I'm overproducing energy and I'm selling it back to you, Mr. Utility, you should pay me for it. Because you're not having to buy that energy off the grid, you're getting it from me. I'm like a little mini remote power plant for you. Awesome. But you shouldn't sell back so much of it that now the power companies can't make any money. So where's the right balance in what right geography? In Hawaii, kind of a different story. There was so much explosion in Hawaii and their grid was relatively immature, or called antiquated. They put so much solar on and there was so much overproduction, the grid started to collapse. Too much backfeed. They actually had to kill net metering and say, not only will I not pay you for your energy, which is where they started, now they basically said, I'm not even going to let you ship it back to me. Like, I don't even want it, much less pay for it, because it's killing me. So now in Hawaii, what used to be a very profitable solar business has got very low payback, because almost everybody overproduces in Hawaii. I mean, you open up your window, you don't need air conditioning, but you get a lot of sunshine, right? So again, policy issue. Now, if I'm in Arizona, like I talked about, and I don't have net metering, and we talked about tax equity and cash equity financing stuff, and I'm the guy who's funding against the customer cash payments, now I'm thinking, well, wait a second. If the customer doesn't have net metering in year 11, and they don't get value for selling the energy back, are they going to think, geez, I don't want to make my lease payment anymore because my economics stopped working in year 11? So now there's customer credit payment risk, and my cash equity partner says, I don't really want to give you as much money for that anymore because now I think the customer might not make a payment because of policy risk. Nevada is a perfect example. So about 2 years ago, I think, the state of Nevada just came down and said, no more net metering in Nevada. Killed the solar industry. Sunrun was in there, Solar City was in there, SunPower was in there, killed the solar industry. Not only did they say no more net metering going forward, they killed it retroactively. So if you were promised net metering when you signed up as a customer in the state of Nevada, they said no more. So not only customers who thought they were going to get payback no longer can do it going forward, the payback they thought went away. Now fortunately, advocacy from SEIA and other groups got the state to change the policy back. But it went all the way through the governor's office because the utility was lobbying very hard and the politicians were listening to the utility, and sanity prevailed. And Nevada came back and said, no, we'll kind of grandfather you back in the net metering you used to have that we canceled, we'll give it back to you. So it basically kills the industry in certain states. So depending on what data point, is a really long answer to your question. But you can have a data point that says, geez, I thought my payback period was 10 years and now it's 15 because I don't have net metering. Or the cost was higher when it was 15 and now the costs are lower and it's still 15, what happened? Or, no, I'm in a policy-friendly environment. I got a payback period of 5.5 years now.
Just as a clarification for Austin Energy, they won't net meter negative, but they'll give you a credit. So I'll have zero, like particularly the shoulder months, 2, 3, 4 months a year, and then it rolls over. That credit goes to the next month.
Yeah, so in Texas, it's all driven by your local utility provider. So Austin Energy can offer that locally. If you're not in Austin Energy, like if you're in Williamson County, you can buy your electricity from, Reliant or TXU or, pick your number. And you can shop for which electricity vendors have a solar-friendly program. I'll buy back your electricity. I'll buy it back at half of your retail rate. I'll buy it back at 2/3 of your retail rate. So my program right now is I export back to the grid at less than retail, and I size my system so I'm not overproducing, so I'm not giving them free energy. So my shoulder months are probably 3 weeks in April and 3 weeks the end of October, and I don't overproduce other than that because I didn't want to get caught in the net metering thing.
That rate risk to your customers, if at all. So it sounds like your financiers are fairly savvy about policy or rate risk.
Yeah, so we only, it depends, so the states we're in. So there's two parts when we do financing, right? And I don't mean to talk about residential financing all the time, but it's really the only area I'm somewhat qualified to talk about. We do financing, I want to say, in 8 states right now, primarily for 2 reasons. One is, can we hit the avoided cost of power? And number 2 is it policy friendly? So not only what is the cost of power, can I beat it, but is there a net metering policy? And some states Florida's a great example. Don't allow third-party ownership. Florida should be a great state for solar. They don't allow a third party to own the solar system on your house because they think that third party is going to come and make a claim against your house, and they're going to protect the homesteads of Florida residents. So stuff like this absolutely affects our customers from a policy standpoint. So our objective as we get costs down is to try and enter more markets. So where we see a lot of growth, potential for growth, is how many new markets can we open up and go into, right? Not necessarily how to sell more in the markets we're in. Texas, we don't do leasing in Texas because we don't have net metering. Our financiers won't take the credit risk for financing lease customers in Texas. Because without net metering, they view the customer credit risk as too great.
We're running up on time. Why don't we take one more question?
Other question. It's now called duck power for
The duck curve.
the peak. Does it make any sense to provide batteries to the customers?
Absolutely. So, great question. Actually, I had this written down. Thank you for that. Time of use and duck curve. So we'll end on that. That's okay. Thank you.
That was a plan.
So anybody know what the duck curve is? So basically the duck curve is, hey, the people who use electricity during the day go like this, and then you got the duck's neck, it goes up, and let's call that between 3 and 5 o'clock at night, and then it starts to go down. Okay. Well, solar power peaks earlier than that. So you have this mismatch when solar peaks, when you use energy. Okay. So if you're a commercial customer especially, and in states where there's a lot of demand-supply imbalance, like California's famous for kind of these rolling blackouts that happen during this duck period peak. So they have something called time of use rates, where I'm going to charge you your electricity based on the overall demand in the marketplace and the time in which you use the electricity. So I'm not going to sell you electricity for 20 cents a kilowatt hour. I'm going to sell you 20 cents a kilowatt hour, except during the duck curve period, I'm going to sell it to you at 35 cents a kilowatt hour. So now if I've got a solar system who maybe allows me to buy power at, say, 22 cents, hey, during the time, or at 19 cents, during the time it's 20 cents, my solar system makes all the sense in the world. But it makes more sense for me to offset my 35 cent power than my 20 cent power. So when I produce power between noon and 1 o'clock, I don't want to use that power from the solar system because I'm only saving a penny. I want to take that solar power and I want to put it in the bank, and I want to use it between 3 and 5 when my cost of power is 35 cents because I'm saving more money. So not only do you get solar, do you get storage, but you've got the software and the building management intellect to make that happen. So again, if you're a software programmer and you want to develop some cool apps, building management apps and energy utilization tied to when your system's running, you guys have all seen the kind of the smart home thing. Hey, when should I run my washing machine? When should I run my dishwasher? Same thing, except on a much bigger dollar schedule. We are now quoting in California about 30% of our solar systems with storage to manage the duck curve.
Cool.
There you go.
Very good.
Thank you very much.